Joining me is Colten Wilke. He's an accomplished actor, producer, filmmaker, writer, and an expert diver. And he's here today to talk about his successful career, his latest project, and how he stays fit. Welcome, Colten.
Oh, thank you for having me. That was quite an intro. Uh, you remember the diving, so that's cool. That's great. Thank you for that. It's nice to be here.
Yes, and thank you. And which came first, acting or diving?
Ooh, well, I guess maybe the acting bug came first, but was, burrowed and sleeping for quite some time. And I was 20 years old and I went to a diving academy. So that came first. And, years later, the diving dug itself. I mean, the acting kind of found itself while I was out working in Alaska, working on a vessel called the Nautilus Swell. So because of that, that's a long story, but I had to relocate to Victoria. And sure enough, Victoria being such an artsy and college town, there on my days off from Alaska, I could go to these acting programs. And then eventually I was like, all right, well, it's always been lingering. It's something I've always thought about. Maybe I should take that step.
Colten, was there a pivotal moment that you said, I want to study acting? I want to be an actor.
Yeah, so I was working up north on the oil rigs in northern Canada, and I was saving up money to go for diving. And I know that seems like it is a harsh world, but at the time, I was so young and fresh out of school. And my brother, who's a lot older than me, worked up there. So it was a lot of, I was just young and inexperienced. So it was like, it wasn't there was a lot of hardships going on. But to me, I looked at every experience with a lot of fun, and, getting dirty and working hard was kind of great at that point, and saving all that money to pay for school. But on my off time, like for 3 hours a day, and while I would be working this long labor, I would think of like film ideas and be like, well, I'm gonna, write these down. I've got them in my head. I'll write them down when I get home or back to camp and stuff. And then I went to diving school, and so it became just a hobby, would be writing down scenes and screenplays and things. And then when I was hired in Alaska on the Swell, and also the sister vessel down in Mexico, we were writing, I would be writing as well. And I was like, this is like, I really enjoy just telling these stories. And none of them were really like, I'm definitely not a great writer, but looking at some of the scripts, of course, but it was just a hobby and a way for me to like, think of things while I'd be out there doing this long labor work. And then, yeah, basically when I went to Victoria, so acting, I got the bug in high school, but I was playing a little too much. I was too much of an athlete at the time. So it wasn't like, you're not very, you're not really, it's sad to say, I hope it's changed now, but at least the group of men that I were hanging out, or boys that we were hanging out with, acting was not the thing. And drama club was also just like, stay focused on baseball and hockey, Colton. So, but it was always lingering there. So when I moved to Victoria, and I saw the acting schools going on, and in particular, the Victoria Academy of Dramatic Arts, I was fishing at the time as well. And I just was like, I went and checked these things out. I liked it. And then this man named Benoit, who's from Quebec, he's the chef on board the Swell. I was sitting there with him on the back deck of the Swell one day, and I was like, Benoit, I think I gotta go try to act. He's like really colorful and just the really easiest guy to talk to, And I just said to him, I was like, Benoit, I think I'm going to go to this acting program and like put this diving stuff on hold, because I knew I could always come back to it. So that's the one moment. In fact, if for anybody who knows Alaska at all, and I don't know if any of your viewers or listeners will, but we were at a place called Baranof Island, and all the guests were out on a shore excursion. And this was one of the rare times where the captain and the first mate left. And so I was able to stay on deck like for dog watch, and we were just chatting. I had a scotch and he had some wine, and we just were talking about life. And then a year after that, I was in acting school.
Wow, wonderful. And I understand you wrote your script while working, and Thunderbird was born.
Yeah, so the Thunderbird is so Nicholas Treason wrote Thunderbird, but I started writing a screenplay called Will Be in the Sea Lion Woman, and,
Hmm.
which one day I hope you'll see. And so as we started Ocean Twilight Films, myself and Gabrielle Edelman and Mike Morrison. And Gabrielle, I actually met on the Nautilus Swell as well. So it's weird how relationships work, but 6 years later, something comes to fruition where all of a sudden you find like, I met her years ago back in like 2013. And then, all of a sudden, so it's weird how those things work. I try not to dive too into thinking about overthinking that, but yeah, it started there. And then Nicholas came in and had this great idea. He's like, oh, I love some of these things that you've got, like the element of fishing. We wanted to see the Pacific Northwest as like kind of the backdrop of the film. And we needed someone with some expertise to come in and kind of hone in on these ideas and put something like a great script like Thunderbird together. Um, so there
Yeah.
were some certain elements that like had to stay in the film. And, but other than that, it was kind of rewritten and jigged around. So, yeah.
Yeah. So this was your first feature film, right? Thunderbird, you play the lead actor, and tell us about that.
Yeah, very, it was obviously biting off a little bit more that you can chew. At least a lot of people said that. They're like, what do you're making your own film but looking at the industry and how like all these things work, I just came from such a different world that I don't think I really, ignorance is bliss, we'll say. So I was like, I came here to make a movie. I was diving, making a great living. And my goal was to be in film, make a movie and act. So my objective, I think, coming to town was a little bit different than most actors or actresses. I was like, I just want to come and make a film. And in doing so, it's going to have to start a company and try to, make a project and allocate and find funding for it and use some of my own money that I've got saved and just get onto camera, and I wasn't necessarily looking for anyone to give me that opportunity, but try to manifest it myself. So, obviously that's a lot to chew, but if you're going to make your own film, it's like, and my expertise, I thought, was in acting. I wasn't there to be a director or a head writer or anything. I was like, I can do the best that I possibly can and know that I'm doing the best for everybody who's a part of the film as the actor. And in which case we tailored the screenplay around me being the lead. And then, of course, like Natalie Brown coming in and Julian Black Antelope and all these, and Aaron Douglas, and William Bellew, just these really great actors and actresses who were so kind to me and working with me, knowing it was my first time. But at that point, I was just a sponge, So it was that first day, I was very nervous, but it's weird. They just calmed down. When I met Natalie, it was like, oh, she was so cool. I had nothing. I went in with like, no preconceptions of someone or anything like that, but just, you hear things like people might be divas or something, or, the guys might be like, no, I don't want to practice my lines with you. I don't know. I just, you just hit, but that was so wrong. And just things that, nobody's like that. And everyone was so great and really helped me out.
Yes, and Colten, you are multi-talented and you have a special skill set. I believe, you're a professional diver, an actor, producer, writer, and I forgot to put your halibut fisher, right? Fisherman. So, but looking at all those skills that you have it can transpire into being who you are today and moving forward. And but I'd like to talk about your diving, how how much training do you have to be fit to be a diver? It helps, right?
Well, for leisure diving, I'd say to anybody out there, you don't have to be fit. The beauty about diving is that you can be weightless underwater. For example, we had an 88-year-old woman come on, and she could barely. She came on board on the vessel in Mexico I worked on, and she could barely, walk onto the boat, and we'd have to help her around. But we'd put her in water. She'd be in her wetsuit, and we would strap her BCD onto her and just like a really light weight. And then underwater, she's just weightless, swimming around because but if you're going to do diving as a career, yeah, you need to be in good shape. For example, the training that we would do at the dive academy, in the morning, we'd go on 2,500-meter swims to start our day. And just to start, yeah. So, and then we'd work out in the day, in midday after, like we'd swim at 6 o'clock in the morning, go breakfast, and then you'd get to class, you'd have your first, and then you'd be diving, and that, an hour dive underwater takes a lot out of you. And, and then of course the work in Alaska, you're doing other things as well. So yeah, you had to be in tip top shape. It definitely wouldn't be, for the faint of heart. You need to be always focused on your cardio and making sure that you're able to go for 16 hours a day with 4 1-hour dives. And it drains you. Like when you're underwater and you're, breathing nitrox or different percentage of gas, and it just drains you. So you need to always be cognizant of getting your sleep and eating. It's hard to eat sometimes when you're out at sea. Like you got to just, make sure you're getting the calories in, especially for someone like me. And I know for obviously a lot of runners, it's like, we got those lean bodies, and you gotta keep the calories coming in, and the fuel.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about your latest project, the Shipwrecked Hogger. It's exciting. I mean, I saw the trailer and it's just spectacular. And tell us your involvement, or I should say the process.
Yeah, it's interesting with projects. You never know what's going to be next and things like that. I guess you always think like, well, I can't wait to act in my next film, or I can't wait to, write or direct, and I think everybody's just kind of getting pulled in every direction. And for this, like, I didn't see this coming at all. A good friend of mine, his father, he's a miner, and he's super passionate about trains. During the COVID breakout, my festival tour with Thunderbird got completely squashed, which obviously sucked a little bit. But I was just playing golf with my friend Clint, and he's like, "Hey, my dad wants to talk to you about this train that we talked like just there and back about this idea that there's this train down there and we should make a show about it or something." But it was never, it was just a couple buddies chatting, right? And so Jeff Stibbert is behind that, and we had just talked, I guess it was last summer, because this hasn't been going on too long. So it was last summer in June, we had just discussed like, well, what are we going to try to do? And I was like, well, one, we got to find the train. So the diving background helped that, right? So like, you're probably the guy to find the train. You can call your friends or be the project manager. So that's the difference, where it's like, I'm not just producing. So it was that, but also then film something around it. So it's like, there's 2 objectives. Like, I'm going to produce a documentary about this whole process, but also I've got to put together a team to find this lost train. So 2 kind of objectives, and totally different than making a feature film. But again, what we were talking about, like, you find yourself doing something that all of a sudden involves the skill sets that you've just learned over the last few years. And it's like, what a great project for me. And now that we're near the finish line, we're just in the last 2-3 months of post here. It's like, what a way to just incorporate a passion of my love with diving, and then also with film, with film, and now like having a documentary crew out, which I put together myself. And it was, so we started this company called Hoghead Media, myself and Clint, and just to be like, let's just make this will be our the first documentary or thing for this company. And his dad was the owner and investor of it now. And basically we follow a documentary crew. Documentary crew follows a group of people looking for the lost locomotive 3512 that sunk in 1946 in Slocan Lake. And the way that it sunk was, back then they had to barge the train down the lake because the Valhalla and Selkirk mountain ranges are so steep that back then they didn't have a rail going along the sides. So they'd have to load the barge full of the train cars, and then they'd have to tug on a tugboat all the way down the lake. And then at some point at 5 o'clock. I think it was 5 o'clock. The one pump, the barge on the port side had taken on water. And it had been for about a month, but they had pumps out there. But it was New Year's Day, and I don't think somebody was checking the pumps as much as they should have been. At 5 a.m, they realized that the barge is listing at a 45-degree angle. So they wake the train crew and they're like, we need to get you guys off this barge because this thing's about to topple over. So in the middle of the lake, which is always, for some people it's hard to fathom because like, wait, the train sunk? How's it in the middle of the lake? Shouldn't it be off the side, or, didn't it just fall off the rail? It's like, no, this thing sunk middle of the lake. All the train cars just flipped right over and sunk to the bottom. And so, so the documentary follows a group of individuals trying to find that train. And then also we take you to the Slocan Valley. Have you ever been there?
No, but it sounds beautiful. Like it looks so like.
Also, I don't, did Leslie send you the trailer?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's spectacular.
So this is the most, it's 4 hours east of Kelowna. So I had never been there after growing up in the Okanagan. I'm like, how did I miss this place? I've been to Nelson, Cranbrook, but like there's 3 small municipalities of maybe 200 to 400 people that live in the mountain area. But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, we're talking thousands and thousands of people came here. They came from all over the world, all just to make it rich and strike it in the silver boom that was going on. There's ghost towns around there, but you just know when you're in the valley, there's no one around, but you feel the presence of memory and history. It's very mystic. Like if you're into that kind, like you're like, wait, like this place was bustling at one point. Every mountain peak had at some point miners and going through it. And some of the most hardiest women ever in your life that you can imagine going up there, and they were the doctors, the nurses, the bartenders, and then all these men whose life expectancy was like 35 if they're lucky. There's in Sandon, which is a ghost town. We obviously got to talk to the curator of the museum there, and he showed us all they took out all the grave stumps because they were getting stolen. And you just see these people, and it just says like where they're from, their name, and the year they died and the year they were born. And it's like 27, 28, 35, like just brutal hardship life. So I think that's something that, we as Canadians forget sometimes. It's like, for the early settlers who came here, the First Nations bands all over the country, they had lived here for thousands of years and had figured it out. But for the settlers who brought this whole, different way of life to come here and to survive. I don't know what your grandparents were, but I know my grandma lived in northern Alberta. She moved over from Ukraine, and they lived in, with nine kids in that, like in a wooden shack in -40, like it's unfathomable. So these people came all over, and we dive into the documentary. We dive into the history of why trains were there, but also just the history of the people, the mining that was going on. And then also we tie in what's going on now with the town. Like we meet some really interesting characters, because like people are not living, you're not going out to, like these are solitary species. I call them the humans, who live out there. Like they're not, but when you do come and they come out of their homes and like, they're living out there to get away from the hustle and bustle. I get that. But because of that, now you get the most true and honest person. You're not dealing with any facade or, like this is them to their, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's a little, abrupt, but it's really great getting to meet those people. And that's probably the best part about this. And same with Thunderbird, when we were able to go to Port Hardy and work with the Kwagito First Nations or the people of Fort Rupert. It's like, in order to use the Thunderbird dance in the movie Thunderbird. So when you watch the movie and they're dancing around the fire and Will, and Chief George or Julian and myself are sitting there talking, and you see the dancing going on. That is the Thunderbird dance that's been passed on for generations to the hereditary chief, David Knox. And he gave us the blessing to use that. And to do that, myself and my partner, who was the production accountant, one of my best friends, Ben Flamondon, we carved a mask with him to, so just build, it took like a month, and that's not the shake your hand business deal. That's like let's get to know one another and let's break bread and carve this mask. And I was very, very fortunate to be given that mask after. But moral of that is like an indie feature like Thunderbird enables the film crew and myself, for example, to go deeper into filmmaking with making personal connections that go beyond doing something down the street here in Van. And that's what I learned as well, was the same with this documentary. It's like there's personal relationships that get built that go beyond just an exciting camera crew coming into your town. You get to know people. I was just back there this summer, and we just 3 weeks ago, and what we did, I don't want to spoil anything, so you can decide how you want to do this, but what we did is we showed some of all the townsfolk and the people that we used in interviews in the documentary. We had 50 people. We showed them some of the train footage that we may or may not have found first, so that they see it, before the world does, and reconnecting with them. Because of COVID, they haven't seen anybody, and they haven't been out. And, we were the only people that they saw out of the town last summer, which was obviously, there was this weird window when things opened up. I know I'm rambling here. I'm sorry.
No, love it. I love it. And this is our viewers watching, it's fascinating what you're doing. And it's like, this has to be told, right? About this train that Bill Chapman, he's the last survivor, right?
So one of the great things that we did, it's like Carrie Cartner, who was associate producer with me for this project, she came and we put flyers around the town when we first went and met the mayor and all those type of things. Then, her numbers on it. She gets called. She's like, from the random people who's like, I know about that train. You're never going to find it. Hang up. Or like, I've heard this, I've heard that. And then one person calls it. It's like, hey, I know the guy who was on that ship on the train that night when it went down. And I'm thinking like, no way. I'm doing the math. I'm like, he'd have to be like, either he was a kid or, and turns out Bill Chapman, we get his number. I call this guy and I was like, is this Bill Chapman? He's like, yep. I was like, were you on the barge the night of December? I mean, the last New Year's Eve, 1946, when 3512 went down. He's like, oh yeah, I remember that night. And I'm just like, I was like, I'm Colten. I need to come meet you. And sure enough, we meet Bill Chapman. He's 97 at the time, but he's 98 now. And he's living on his own in Penticton, BC. He goes for 3 30-minute walks a day. He cooks all of his own food. His daughter, who's in her 70s, comes and checks in on him. And he's got a granddaughter there as well. But this guy's completely self-sufficient, witty, there was no, my grandmother, bless her soul, passed away at 92. And at 92, she was, really, out of sorts at that time. So I don't have much experience with people of that age. So to meet Bill was the most refreshing thing. We made his year, as he said it, because there's these people who are just like, we're just like, tell us your story, tell us your life, let's talk, and we built a relationship with Bill, and he's the last living member. He was there that night. He was 23 years old. He was the youngest member of the crew, and he was there that night, and he shares his story in this documentary with us. And once for example, when they're like, hey, go find a train, make a doc about it, we had no idea what that would entail. Like, and then sure enough, the story tells itself from doing some digging and some research. And you meet a guy like Bill Chapman. I don't know how many 98-year-olds you're hanging out with, but there ain't many of them around. And to tell their story is so important right now. You know, I don't know how, I'm not much of an influencer or anything like that. And, you know, but you're right. Like, I don't know how I get Bill's story out there, but that's the game. It's like, we got to make sure this resonates with young people, because it's amazing what this guy who's still alive was doing. He went to World War II. You know, he came back, he met his wife, who was building planes in Scarborough, Ontario. And he went out there and he was training as a pilot, and his wife and these all female crews were running the machinery, building these planes. You know, they weren't allowed to go to war. But they had to fight their own war at home, which means taking care of kids, building these massive planes. You think now of, you know, so it's just, yeah, it's just amazing story that, you know, I'm so privileged to be able to know, and for him to share that with us. And it's hard for people to fathom. You think that World War II, there's nobody alive from that. It's like, oh no, like that's not so long ago, you know. We're not far removed.
Yeah, you know, so it's a 5-part documentary series, and
initially we were trying to sell it as like a 2-part, 3-part, but we've got some things in motion now where it's going to be an hour and 40-minute, 50-minute feature doc.
Yes. And what do you want people to take away from the documentary?
Well, it really is going to tailor to whatever your niche is. Like if you love trains, you're probably just going to be so focused on the hunt for the train. But for me, I just like you to take this sense of like, you meet a lot of interesting characters. I'm more enamored by that. Like there's these individuals that people will never get the opportunity to see. So just to take away the sense of like, wait, there's a way to connect with people. There's a way to go into towns. You don't have to be a film crew, but you can go into a small town and you can try to get to know the lady who's working at the random shop behind, you know, the counter, or, you know, not be afraid to talk to, because the way that we filmed a lot of these candid interviews was very just like, let's go shake this person's hand, or let's go try to talk to him. And so ideally, if you can walk away with a sense of, you know, a little bit more connectivity with people that you might initially look at and say like, yeah, I'm not going to go talk to them or talk to the stranger. I think that's one thing we're missing with our phones right now. It's just this sense of like, you know, I'm going to talk to the people who are right here and stick with them. But when you really to dig a little deeper, everyone's got an amazing story, and people want to talk and share that connection, especially the older generations. So, you know, and then as well, of course, I want you to find like, you know, being like, it's amazing to look for lost relics and trains. And it's like, there's so much history in Canada. We like, yeah, we're not the oldest country, but there's a lot going on here, you know, and there's a lot that we need to be proud of. And, you know, we have this amazing First Nations culture that remanates all the way through our whole country, you know, and we have this amazing settler culture that just came in the last 200 years. And the two of them are give us a lot. Like we don't have to be, you know, have 1,000 years of history documented like the Brits or something like that. You know, we've got enough here to really dive in and soak in. So I'm really fascinated by that.
Colten, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Gosh, I'm not sure, Christine. It's just been really nice chatting with you. I don't know if that's the norm interview you have, but I just think it's nice to be able to talk. So I know I've been rambling, but gosh, I don't know.
No, I enjoyed our interview so much, and I like you to come back. And, you know, if people want more information, where can they go?
So Hoghead Media has a website. So it's just Hoghead Media. You look that up, you'll see it. And there's the trailer up there, and there's a little bit of a write-up. And then of course, Ocean Twilight Films for all things Thunderbird. But yeah, please, it'd be nice to meet you in person. I live here in Van. I'm trying to go for more runs, so it's always nice to have some motivation.